more minutes. 2 more minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Before we start, I want to say, everybody can say happy birthday, Eleanor Moore. All in one. Happy birthday! We've got some distinguished guests here with us today. I know this is the most, since I've been here, this is the most people I've seen in the auditorium. I mean, I guess it was like this maybe before COVID, but I haven't seen it since. Very impressive that we got everybody here. I'll introduce the players today. I'll start with our Chief Financial Officer, Kevin Salminen, over in the corner. Dan Nyman, the Chief Operating Officer. He told me he was Dan Nyman. Right there. Everybody knows Jeff Hagan, our Interim Director. And I'm sure most everyone knows Chris Henderson, the CEO of Pinnacle Living. Some of you might not know, if you're new here, that Chris was the executive director here from 1997 to 2005. Yeah. And he was just a youngster at that juncture. So we're glad to have him back, and we look forward to the presentation. And you don't need to hear from me, so welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And Mike said, when were you executive director here? I said, when I was skinny and had hair, which was a long time ago. But some of you may remember, some of you who were here back in the 90s may remember that my wife and our 2 daughters lived in 2153 for about 6 months. When we first came to town, Sarah and I had built a brand new home in Stafford County, Virginia. And then we got tapped to move to Richmond and become a part of the Cedarfield family, and we're thrilled to be here. Our daughters were 2 and 4 at that time, almost 2 and almost 4 when we came here in the spring of '97. And now Gabby is 29 and married and living in Omaha, Nebraska, and Kate is 27, and fortunately she lives in Richmond with us. So time flies for all of us. But I want to thank you all for being with us today. As David Stewart said, a crowd like this feels like all the way back in 1998 when we first opened Cedarfield. This is the way town meetings were. So thank you all for being with us today. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and I want to be honest with you and tell you that we're going to try to keep this to an hour. These are the items that we want to discuss today, and I know there are a lot of other items that you all want to discuss as well. And if I walk away from the microphone, please yell at me because I'm a pacer. So please help me remember that we've got people in their apartments and cottages keeping an eye on this as well and monitoring us remotely. We're going to make copies of these slides available at the front desk, at the concierge desk. So please feel free to pick those up after this evening, after we have a chance to make some copies of them. But you can see there are a number of issues on here that we want to discuss. There are also a number of issues that aren't on here, such as the renovation of this space and the renovation of the lobby and the Faith Center and the chapel. Those are items we want to touch upon, but we've got to bring some groups together and have some conversation about those. The contractor, Horrigan, has pulled the permit for the lobby space, but Found out last week that there was very, very little input from the residents on the final finishes of that space. So we've hit pause on that contract. And we're gonna bring some residents together and talk about what we can do with that space. So if you would like to be a part of that conversation, and trust me, I know nothing about color, so I do not have an opinion one way or the other. But if you'd like to be a part of that conversation, we're going to ask you to reach out to Eleanor and let her know that you'd like to be a part of the conversation as well. Because it's important that you all know what we want to do, what we plan to do. This space, if you look around you, is really tired. You know, the draperies on the walls here were from 1996. Sharon and the team have done a great job of holding things together in this room, but we've got a lot of work we want to do in this room. One of the big issues in this room, and it's going to get humid in here before this hour-long meeting wraps up, is the air conditioning in this space. And we've got to make some major improvements to that with a big dehumidifier, new air handlers, and things that I don't know anything about. So that's all planned, but we don't have any final plans in that regard either. So if you'd like to be a part of those conversations, talk with Eleanor. And we're going to talk about another thing that we need for some of you to reach out to Eleanor for as well, okay? So, Mike, thank you. We talked about this, it seems, in the fall, about me coming and sitting down. I sat with the past presidents group. Was that October? I think it was October. And Mike said, would you be willing? I said, this is the fun part of the job. I love this part. So thank you. Appreciate that time. But we're going to talk about these items up here today. We want to talk about the Pinnacle Living structure and how Pinnacle Living, Cedarfield, the Hermitage communities, Windsor Mead, and all of those pieces and parts fit together. I know there's a lot of question about our board of directors. So we're going to share some information about our board of directors. Last month, it's still January, last month we received a request, or was it early January? Recently we received a request from the Residents Association, and I apologize, I think it was end of December. I think it was the end of December, to have some discussion about a new resident on the board of directors. We'll talk about that. Kevin is going to talk about our financial structure and at a very high level, capital investments and financial performance for Pinnacle Living for the end of our fiscal year. Dan is going to share some results for Pinnacle Living for the recent We Care Connect resident satisfaction survey that we did. That's one of those ones that we want to share some global information with you about, and then we're going to ask Jeff and the team to come back at future town meetings and talk specifically about Cedarfield and the results there. But some really interesting information is coming to us about that. I'd like to talk just a little bit about our efforts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, if you will. I know we've had a very, very active and engaged DEI committee here at Cedarfield. We want to grow that, and we're going to talk about what we're doing in that regard. We want to share a brief update on where we are with the executive director search, and then we want to talk about the future and what we see the future for Pinnacle Living being. After that, we're going to hit pause and come to the floor for questions and answers. We're going to try to do all that in about an hour. Does that sound okay with everybody? Buddy Garrett said I should have packed a sandwich. All right. So very, very quickly, Eddie, how about transitioning and getting that camera out of my face and projecting on the screen, if you will, so that the folks in the cottages and apartments can join us.
Will we lower the lights?
Yes, we will lower the lights as well. Oop. I keep forgetting that I can't walk away from the microphone. I almost did. Eddie, you give me the thumbs up when you're ready, sir. All set? All right. Super. So the first thing we want to talk about are the Pinnacle Living mission, vision, and values. Now, most of these should look familiar to just about everybody. The mission of Enriching Life's Journey was changed back in 2017 when Virginia United Methodist Homes became Pinnacle Living. I want to talk about that for just 1 second. I think there's a slight misunderstanding with some folks that when VUMH became Pinnacle Living, there was a sale transaction or something changed. That's not the case. Virginia United Methodist Homes opted to change its doing business as name to Pinnacle Living. So if you look at your disclosure statement and if you look at your residency agreement is with Virginia United Methodist Homes Incorporated, doing business as Pinnacle Living. And then that DBA carries through the rest of those documents as Pinnacle Living. Things haven't changed in that regard. But our mission is a simple one, and that's enriching life's journey. But it's not enriching life's journey for older adults or for those we serve because we feel as though we owe more to our team members and our community than that. We want to enrich life's journey for everyone who touches one of our Pinnacle Living campuses. And that's not an easy process. Our vision statement is a culture in which age does not define the person. You know, along with diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's a lot of conversation lately about ageism. And we've all experienced that. I'm now 55 years of age and I have an AARP card because I want to take advantage of those discounts. I forget to use it all the time though, but I have one. And with ageism comes some other challenges that we all face day in and day out as well. So that is an important part of what we do. And then our values are culture, diversity, stewardship, partnership, hospitality, and lastly, quality. And I've heard from a lot of you over the last several months that quality is something we need to work on here. We've got a great team, we've got great team members, but we've got to do a better job of delivering services to you all. And your department directors are committed to that, and we're committed to that at Pinnacle Living, and we want that to be the case. Now, there are 4 strategic goals that are associated with the strategic plan that was approved back in 2017. And those strategic goals are safeguard a resident-directed culture, create forward-thinking programs to strengthen engagement of residents, team members, and community partners, continuously update and maintain, continuously update and maintain safe, secure, and appealing communities our residents are proud to call home. And lastly, explore opportunities appropriate to community locations and future market needs. And that's an important one, and we're going to come back to that one in just a little while too. Each of our communities has developed objectives and action steps in support of those 4 strategic goals. And I think the biggest of those goals, safeguarding a culture and creating communities that you all are proud to call home, is happening here at Cedarfield, but sometimes we struggle to see that. You know, if the draperies were open, we have a beautiful wellness building. And Kevin's going to talk very, very briefly. We've got one slide and one slide only, I promise you, talking about the capital improvements we've made here at Cedarfield over the last 5 years. That's an important part of who we are and what we do. But remember that wellness building, the concept of that started with you. And it was our Living Links to Wellness program, or our Pathways program. That's an important part of who we are here at Cedarfield and something that we need to be proud of and we need to lift up and talk about more often. You all do a great job with that, and we need to do a better job as we move forward. Our team's been working diligently to prepare for our upcoming CARF survey, which is happening here the 8th through the 10th of February. Is everybody familiar with what CARF is?
Yes.
Okay, so don't need to talk about CARF. I heard, don't need to talk about CARF, or we do need to talk about CARF? Don't need to talk about CARF. Okay, we'll park CARF and not talk about that. But the 8th through the 10th of February is when our virtual visit is happening. And CARF, for those who aren't familiar with it, is really like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval, if you'll think back to that, for senior living communities. And there are about 150 CARF accredited communities nationwide. Fortunately, 4 of those communities are Pinnacle Living communities, so we're proud of what we do there. After we complete those CARF surveys, the first week of February is Hermitage Richmond, the second week of February is Cedarfield, the third week of February is Hermitage Roanoke. We're going to be rolling out a new strategic plan, and would love to come back and talk with you about that and what we're doing there. I'm going to touch upon that very briefly on the very last slide here. Excuse me. Sorry. Let's talk for a moment about organizational culture, or our organizational chart, and this one's hard to see in the back of the room, and I apologize for that. At the top of the circle, or at the top of the page, we have the Pinnacle Living Board of Directors. Pinnacle Living is Virginia United Methodist Homes. So it's Virginia United Methodist Homes doing business as Pinnacle Living. Our board of directors is a 9-member board of directors who are elected from the community, and I serve as the 10th member by virtue of the position I hold. The Pinnacle Living Board of Directors is the fiduciary that's responsible for the operations of Windsor Mead, Cedarfield, Hermitage Richmond, Hermitage Roanoke. We're also responsible for the Hermitage Kaplan Reserve Corporation. Thank you. The Hermitage Kaplan Reserve Corporation. Thank you, Eddie. I appreciate that. And as you look at this, you see that there's a dotted line, and when you get the hard copies, that's actually a red dotted line. It's hard to see here, but the Pinnacle Living Board elects both the Windsor Mead Board of Directors, that's a separate entity and a separate fiduciary for Windsor Mead only, and the Board of Directors for Hermitage Capital and Reserve Corporation. HCRC, or the Hermitage Capital and Reserve Corporation, is actually the 501c3 supporting organization that was created to support the missions of Windsor Mead and Pinnacle Living. Kevin serves as our CFO. He's responsible for accounting, budget, finance, and all of those pieces that are associated with that. Dan, who Mike introduced a few minutes ago, is our Chief Operating Officer. And Dan supervises the 4 communities, again, that are Windsor Mead, Cedarfield, Hermitage Richmond, and Hermitage Roanoke. Sorry. Here's the list of our board of directors. And again, these slides are all going to be available to you. You can find this list also in the annual disclosure statement. We have a 9-member elected board, and again, I serve on the board as the president and CEO. In the fall, we actually had a member resign due to health issues, so there are only 9 names here instead of 10. But at our January board meeting, the board elected Lisa Williams to serve as our new board member to replace the board member who resigned for health reasons. Lisa is a partner with McGuire Woods, and she serves as bond counsel, underwriters counsel, and bank counsel on tax-exempt bond financings. And legal work and financing work were one of those weaknesses that we identified with our board. Each board member is eligible to serve 3 3-year terms. Again, each board member is eligible to serve 3 3-year terms. Lisa Hahn is our board chair, and Lisa is the co-founder and partner of Insight Therapeutics, which is a pharmaceutical and healthcare research firm based out of Norfolk, Virginia. Jane Hornbeck is a retired RN and lobbyist, and she serves as our vice chair. And Kevin Bruni is a human resources professional with Chesterfield County, and he serves as our secretary and treasurer. Lisa, Jane, and Kevin serve as our executive committee, and the executive committee also functions as a personnel committee, and they directly employ me. We have a fairly diverse background with our board. 5 of our 9 residents happen to be United Methodists today. That's not always been the case, but that's the case today. And someone said to me not too long ago, well, all of your board members are ministers, and that's not the case. We have 1 retired clergy person on the board, and that's Steve Jones. 5 of 9 members are female. We have 1 black board member, and with the election of our newest board member, we also have 1 Hispanic board member on our board of directors. So diversity is something that we're working to grow with that group as well. As we mentioned earlier, Mike and I began a dialogue back in the fall about resident board representation. And at our January board meeting, we had a very healthy dialogue about that. And I'll say that we had a very positive dialogue about that as well. We realized that as we evolve as an organization, our practices need to evolve as well. So after our board meeting, I reached out to Mike and Ann and asked them to recommend some residents. And we're going to have a dialogue with a few residents and a few board members to talk about what those expectations are. How can we come together talking about a resident on the board, what's the role of the board and what's the role of that board member, and how will that board member interact with the rest of the Cedarfield community and our other Pinnacle Living communities as well. So I feel good about where we are there, and I'll address any questions at the end, but I think we're moving in the right direction in that regard. Okay? Feel like we can talk about that in great detail. I'm going to turn to Kevin now and ask Kevin to provide an update on our financial structure, and then 2 quick slides about financially how we're performing and also our capital expenditure. So Kevin.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Hello. I'm going to get a little oriented with the mouse here. And I think there's a... Oh, that was not good.
Oh, you looking for the pointer?
That's okay. Because accountants always come prepared. I was a Boy Scout. Today I'm going to talk about the financial structure. We're going to talk about the year-end performance, and I've adjusted it for cash because that tends to be what most are interested in. A year-over-year comparison and what inflation is doing and budgetary pressures, and then CapEx and everything that you're seeing here. So I'm going to first start with our financial structure. So Pinnacle Living, as Chris mentioned, is made up of 4 communities. Each of these communities have the same tax identification number. And because of that, when Pinnacle Living was formed and all these communities were formed, they became one obligated group. We added Pinnacle Advantage, some know it as a Pinnacle Advantage at Cedarfield, a few years back as well. Now, what does this mean? We have Pinnacle Living and this obligated group right here. That means accounting-wise and finance-wise, the assets and the liabilities of one community is the assets and liabilities of all communities within the Hermitage Richmond, Roanoke, Cedarfield, Pinnacle Advantage, and our shared resources. And that's important. And that's why when you see the disclosure statement and you see zeros on balance sheets, it's because we don't want to mislead. An asset of one community is the asset of all communities. Winterby was formed back in the early 2000s, and it was formed outside our obligated group. As Chris mentioned, it has a separate tax identification number. Its assets and liabilities are separate. So you'll see Pinnacle Living on a balance sheet, and then separately you'll see Winterby. Chris talked about a supporting organization. That supporting organization, which we always call HCRC or Hermitage Capital and Reserve Corporation, its assets and liabilities are also separated outside the obligated group. But as Chris mentioned, it is overseen by the Pinnacle Living Board of Directors. That part is important. The Board of Directors helps to facilitate and control the functions of the HCRC. A little over a year ago, Pinnacle Living became a partner, a 50% partner in what we call Senior Living Partners of Virginia. And really what that organization does is it provides all of you with home health or personal care services if you choose to take advantage of that. And all of that is maintained by the Pinnacle Living Support Office. That's where Chris and I and Dan sit. And that's where primary of the overall functions are held. Maybe? No? Help me out. Oh, there's the pointer. It's not working for me. Can we click the E?
No, it's not. Huh. All right, Eddie, we need some help. It's not working.
Just turn it off.
Are we okay?
Yep.
All right.
Boy, and they think I can help Mark out with IT stuff. I tell you. All right, let's talk about our year-end financial performance. And I've adjusted this for cash. Most people ask, what is our cash position really? Because accountants like to pretend they're really smart, but really, and in doing that, they try to create these items and these line items that become very, very confusing. And a lot of it has nothing to do with cash. It just has to do with a lot of assumptions. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to back that out of here. So I'm going to review this with you. These statements we've said have been adjusted for cash. Before I begin, though, I really want to talk about how a life plan community set of statements must be looked at because it's different than what you would normally expect. First, cash from operations, these are our operating and non-operating items, they must be paired with entrance fees because that's how the organization and the industry works. So when I take a look at cash or when the finance committee takes a look, we not only look at overall cash surplus or deficits from operations, but we pair that with our net entrance fees. And one of the reasons why we do that is because you have a life care contract. With life care contracts as your primary contract, entrance fees help to subsidize your health care expenses. And so that's why it's important to look at those together. Now, sometimes I've been told by David Taylor and James Green, we receive questions, and one of those questions is, do we have enough reserves to cover our health care needs in the future? And the short answer to that is absolutely we do. Every year, the actuary looks over our statements as well and lets us know if we ever have a future service obligation, which we have never had, and we've also received their seal as an actuary that we are in good financial standing. And that's important to point out. If I was a resident, I would want to know that as well. So when we review all of these financial statements, and I come down to the bottom, that's really where I'm looking at, right? Because our operations plus entrance fees go to help pay for all of our capital expenses, and they go to help pay on the principal payments like you used to have for your home for bonds. And we do have a cash surplus. We want to see that as an organization. And the cash surplus of $1.4 million and $900,000 for Windsor Mead is reasonable, and I think that's something that the Finance Committee does focus on. We do have at the bottom here, I stripped it out of the operations because they're one-time payments that typically do not happen. We do this because we don't want to give a false impression of recurring payments or recurring income that we would receive. We have received some money from government funding. That's very positive with the various government programs that took place over COVID-19. And the HCRC put money back into Pinnacle Living and to Windsor Mead. This is the part I really want to highlight for you. I need to talk about, just quickly, inflationary pressures, and I think you're seeing it on television, and it's real. And what we have seen when we look at our financial statements, salaries have increased year over year by about 12%. Contract labor, which sort of pairs a little bit with salary, it's labor-oriented, 15%, and recruitment and retention, 11%. That recruitment and retention piece is mostly all advertising we have to do on Indeed. Indeed is the big player in the market to when employees go or potential prospective employees go and they want to get hired, they typically go to Indeed, or most of them do. Indeed knows it, and Indeed charges a premium for it. If you've gone to the grocery store or talked to your sons or daughters or grandkids, you know that meal costs have definitely increased, and we have seen that as well. And David and his team, along with our other communities, have worked out an agreement to take advantage of a group purchasing plan to try to help mitigate those. I want to thank David and his leadership for that because it adds pressure overall to the community. And I also expect, it's not on this slide, that information technology, you're going to see, we have seen that as one of our largest increases, and that's never going away, along with cybersecurity claims. So what does that mean in your budgeting process? It means that we have to evaluate and prioritize services. And so Jeff, David, working with our department directors, will begin budgeting begin this budget process soon if they haven't already started. So please work with them on that process. And finally, the great news, and the news you're seeing around the community itself, is all the routine capital. And thank you for your patience on some of these upgrades that we've been doing as well. This slide will break it out for you by year, but I just want to give you the total amounts. Routine capital expenses over the past 5 years, Cedarfield has received $14 million. These are just hard construction costs. There are other capital expenses, but these are our main costs. Community capital upgrades and expansion, that total is $63 million. So over the past 5 years, not including this year even, Pinnacle Living and Cedarfield have invested over $77 million within the community. Chris talked about the wellness building outside, and that's the services that when we started this planning process back in 2014, that these are the services the residents said you were focused on and that you wanted. So that is my presentation, and Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the resident satisfaction surveys. I'm good, thank you. Was that a little more somewhere? Sorry. This is your. That's my hands. Yeah. Don't hit anything here, and this is the other button. Sorry, it's.
Don't hit the red button.
Yeah.
No.
My slides are.
So, I tend to do what you do. I wander and turn. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. Last fall, you had an opportunity to complete the Resident Satisfaction Survey, also known as We Care Connect. Several of you that have moved in since then have also had that opportunity. Just a little brief history, we used to use a survey called Hollerin. Hollerin was the standard that we all used for years and years in the senior living communities. We made the decision to move away from that when the Hollerin company was transitioned to a different organization, no longer exists actually. So we've been working with a company called We Care Connect for several years on our team member satisfaction surveys, and it made perfect sense to transition our resident satisfaction surveys there as well. So I've got a few slides that I want to share with you today at a very high level, and as Chris noted earlier, The department directors here will be working with you in the coming months on the more specific items. First of all is overall resident satisfaction, and you can see that Cedarfield is at an 84%, and the peer data is 81. So we've got some, we're sitting at an 84 here, and these are other communities if you're interested in knowing them, going up the line, Richmond, Roanoke, Windsor. It's great to know that your overall satisfaction here is higher than at Windsor. That works for us. So you can see that the overall score of our company is 82. I'm sorry. Our overall score of the company is 82. The next slide you can see is highly satisfied residents. This is a slide that they do that pulls out, there's highly satisfied, very satisfied, satisfied, somewhat satisfied, totally dissatisfied. And so those are the different levels. And so they pull out the very, very highly satisfied numbers for us. And Cedarfield is at 67, and the benchmark happens to be 67 across the We Care Connect database. So we are sitting right at the median here at Cedarfield. The next slide. Are residents happy living at a Pinnacle Living community? And you can see where these fall. Cedarfield sitting at 49%. The overall score for Pinnacle Living is 54, and the benchmark is 57. So we see that we have some work to do here. This is one area is why are residents not happy living here? So we'll be working on that over the coming months. A couple of specific areas of care. Next will be dining. We pulled out dining and healthcare will be after this one, but dining is sitting at 79% on a benchmark of 70. And so obviously folks are enjoying the dining services here. I think that's what I've heard in my walking around. Folks are very pleased with dining. David and the team do a great job. And the last slide I want to discuss is quality of care, which is really about healthcare, assisted living, and memory care. And we're sitting here at Cedarfield at 86% on a benchmark of 85. And you can see where we fall compared to the other communities as well. That we're sitting just about at the midpoint of the benchmark on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Moving forward, the way we're going to work We Care Connect is rather than doing an annual survey with all residents, we're going to be reaching out to you in the anniversary month that you moved in. So if you moved in January of 2002, or if you moved in January of 2012, we're going to be reaching out to you during the month of January to conduct these surveys. And there are separate surveys for our health services residents, and we just wanted to plant this seed with you all of the high-level Pinnacle Living results, and then Jeff and the team will get into more specific details with you all, the council, and the committees as it relates to other questions. Okay? So thank you, Dan and Kevin. Excuse me, I need to advance my notes just a few pages. I apologize. Let's talk for a moment about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I heard from Mrs. Fiske that the memo that we sent out last week wasn't completely clear, so I'm going to try to clear some of that up, okay? So Cedarfield has had, as I said earlier, a very active DEI committee for some time. Mrs. Fiske, does that go back 5 years? 5 years. I was thinking it was 5. 5 years here at Cedarfield. I will tell you that you all were on the forefront of that in senior living, not just with Pinnacle Living. And as we worked through issues in 2020 and 2021, one of the things we realized as an organization is that we can do better. Plain and simple. We can do better. Both from a residency standpoint, an employment standpoint, a leadership standpoint, and a recruitment standpoint for residents and team members. On January 19th, I shared a memo, and that memo had some detail in it that talked about a program that we're referring to as Dreaming Home. Dreaming Home actually came about from a conversation that I had with Jonathan Cook, who is my counterpart at LifeSpire, the Lakewood provider, formerly Virginia Baptist Homes. And Jonathan and I were talking about the fact that as two 50-plus-year-old white males, we struggle, quite honestly, to identify with some of the challenges that a lot of marginalized individuals experience day in and day out. So we started talking about pulling a small group together to talk a little bit more about that, and we reached out to the folks at Westminster Canterbury, we reached out to Beth Shalom, we reached out to Brander Mill Woods, and we reached out to a couple of other local life plan communities to start that dialogue to say, hey, what can we do better as employers and as people entrusted with millions of dollars to serve our residents to better meet the marginalized communities in the greater Richmond area? So we then turned to Leading Age Virginia, and Melissa Andrews is the CEO of Leading Age Virginia, and we had a conversation with Melissa and saying, we've got 5 communities that are interested in learning more about how we can be better stewards, but we don't know where to start. So we sat down with Melissa, and somebody brought up the Virginia Inclusive Communities Group, the VCIC group, which is an exceptional organization. If you're not familiar with VCIC, I encourage you to go to their website because they do really interesting work. VCIC introduced us to Dolores Kimbrough. Dolores is an independent consultant who's been in Richmond for a number of years, and she's worked with a number of providers to help a number of service providers in varying industries to better understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion truly means. When we sat down with Dolores, we realized that we were farther behind the 8 ball than we realized. So Dolores began to have some preliminary conversations. We brought a group of professionals together, a very diverse group of professionals together from across the greater Richmond area, and formed an advisory team. Martha Stokes, who is our Director for Church and Community Relations, represents Pinnacle Living on that group, and a minister by the name of Daniel Kim, who is a Korean American who is actually almost on the outside of Goochland County at a church, is our other representative with that group. And there are about 40 people who serve on that steering committee. What they've encouraged us to do, and what we're doing now, is we're doing community meetings to talk about senior living opportunities in the greater Richmond marketplace. What are your options? What are your interests? And as marginalized communities, how can we be of better service to you? The next phase of that is to conduct focus groups and have conversations here at Cedarfield, at Brander Mill, at Westminster Canterbury, at Beth Shalom, and at Lake Ridge, to talk with residents and team members about their experiences and how we can do a better job with that. That meeting is scheduled with Dolores here at Cedarfield on February 23rd. We've got about 12 people residents who have signed up for that. We've got space for about 25. So if you'd be interested in learning more about Dreaming Home, listening to what your neighbors feel about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and learning a bit from Dolores about how we may be able to grow and improve our services in that regard, please reach out to Eleanor and let her know that you'd like to be a part of that group. As I said, we were at 12. Yesterday we were at 10, so we've done a really good job of increasing that. Mrs. Fiske tells me she sent a letter to about 22 people yesterday, so she's pushing that as well. We really value your opinion and we need your insights here. We have a Native American group in Charles City that will be meeting next week. Quite honestly, as we talked about marginalized communities, the Native American community was not even something that we'd even considered. So we're growing, we're learning, and we're talking, and we've got a lot of education to do in that regard. So if you'd like to be a part of those conversations, please reach out to Eleanor and talk with us about that. Very quickly, an update on where we are with the executive director. Last week, I sent everyone a memo to let you all know that we've engaged the DEFIT group. The DEFIT group has been doing executive search for senior living since 1989, 86. 89, something like that. Dan Deffitt is the founder and managing partner, and he is leading this search for us. On the 12th, we brought Dan to Cedarfield as step 1 of this process. Dan met with a number of residents. He met with department directors and a number of managers to talk about what we want as an organization in an executive director here at Cedarfield, something we haven't been able to do because of COVID until this year. I made a mistake. When I put that memo out last week, I missed Ann Williams as one of the participants in that group. So Ann should have been added to that as well. She was an active part of the conversation, and somehow her name didn't make it to my list, and I'm embarrassed by that. So I've apologized to Ann. I know she's not here today. But as we move forward, Dan Nyman and I are working with Dan Deffett to finalize a draft of the position description. I sent thoughts to Dan on that on Tuesday afternoon. He's reworking that. Once we have a revised draft of that, we're going to get that to everybody that we met with on the 12th to gain some final insights and thoughts on that. And then after that, we're going to begin the search for an executive director here at Cedarfield. Our goal is to identify an individual by the spring of this year, and we think we can definitely do that. We know Jeff has been doing great work for us, but he is only a stopgap, and we want to allow him to move on and do what's next for Jeff and his family. So we're looking forward to filling that role. I want to thank everyone who was a part of the conversation on the 12th, and we'll be back to you with more information as we go through that. And lastly, I want to finish with what does the future hold for Pinnacle Living? And this is a big one. I've heard from a lot of residents that there are questions about why we do things the way we do them. There are challenges in every department. And folks, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. But we want to limit those mistakes as best we can. I heard from a resident just before this meeting started that she was hospitalized temporarily not too long ago and was told, well, there might not be a bed available in health services. We recognize that as a problem all the way back in early December when we first met with you all. And I realize that that's an ongoing challenge. Dan and Jeff and I have been meeting regularly with the care coordination team. They meet 3 times a week to talk about resident rooms, resident moves, potential challenges, and really how we can better manage that process. And the team is doing good work in that regard. We're not perfect yet, but we do have a little bit more breathing room than we did 2 months ago. And we're happy with the direction that's going. Are we going to be perfect? No. If we have 3 beds available today and we have 3 individuals suffer falls or have challenges and need a bed, there's always the chance. We want to minimize that chance, but there's always the chance that we might be full. But the way we were managing those beds before was not acceptable.
Should we be full of people who, from the outside, are not paying an entrance fee and coming in and taking a bed in our health care?
Can I restate that so everybody can hear?
Sure.
Okay. So the question was, should we be full with people from the outside who didn't pay an entrance fee? And the answer to that is no. We shouldn't. We should bring those people in on a limited basis, and we overdid that, to be very frank. So
Are those people, do they understand if they are occupying our bed and we need it, that they're the ones that will be moved to another facility?
So the question was, and let me make sure I understood that, or I state that correctly, do the people who are term residents, and that's the contract that those folks are in on, a term residency agreement, do they understand that their residency is not a lifetime residency like our life care residents, but could be ended if we need that space? The answer is yes. Fortunately, we've not had to do that in the past, but we do have that option available to us if it becomes a necessity. And those are 30-day term contracts. So with 30 days notice, we can cancel or terminate one of those agreements.
You know, it does not say that on the webpage. On your webpage, it does not clarify that.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Thank you. Okay, we'll take a look at that. But as we look to the future, we know that there are things that we need to improve upon. But as I heard from Mike and I've heard from you, Cedarfield's not the Cedarfield that it was in 1997 when I was the executive director here. It's a different place with different expectations and different mindsets. And that's because you, as residents, have changed. And we're working to meet those changes. And I'll be honest with you and tell you that in about 15 years, the Cedarfield that we have today is not going to be the Cedarfield 15 years from now. Someone asked the question, are we no longer accepting life care residents or life care contracts at Cedarfield? And the answer to that is yes, we are. But in 2008, we introduced the preferred choice contract. And today we have about 50 residents who are preferred choice contract residents rather than type A life care contract residents. Richmond is a little bit of an anomaly when it comes to that life care component. There are only a couple of markets in the United States, not in Virginia, in the United States, where your life care contract is still popular. Richmond is one of those places. And that's because you've had great experience here at Cedarfield or at Westminster Canterbury or at Covenant Woods or at Lakewood with that Type A life care program. If you visited the Erickson community just west of here, I just lost the name. Avery Point. I wanted to say Ashby Ponds. That's their Northern Virginia campus. Avery Point, thank you. They don't offer a life care. Well, they do offer a life care contract, but it's a very, very small percentage of people who take that because they sell what we sell as preferred choice. That's their primary sales. That's their primary sales tool. We are still a life care provider. We do offer preferred choice, but the majority of our residents who come to the community today are life care residents. I don't think that's going to be the case in 10 or 15 years, to be honest with you, because people are willing to take more risk and say, I'll never access health care, so why should I pay for it up front if I may? And time will tell with that. But we're seeing that trend changing here in the Richmond market. I know a lot of you are sitting there shaking your head saying that's not going to happen. It's moving in that direction. Statistically, we can prove it to you.
But isn't the fact that there's more long-term care insurance out there part of that too?
So the question was, isn't that because there's more long-term care insurance out there? Yes, there are other options for people, and long-term care insurance has become very popular. And actually, a lot of employers are offering long-term care insurance. So that helps with some people who make that preferred choice decision. Very good point. Thank you. But as we look to the future, we know that we're going to have to change. Our mission of enriching life's journey isn't going to change. Our ownership structure isn't going to change. But we want to be known nationally for operational excellence. We want to be preferred regionally as a partner for building communities. And we want to be prioritized as a thriving provider who instills trust in those we serve. And I know we've got a lot of work to do that. As we look to the future, there will be changes. Cedarfield will change. Those of you who have been with us for more than just a few years remember the pretty swimming pool that we had and the very, very small fitness center that we had, and would have never envisioned the wellness center that we have in the courtyard today. In fact, I remember standing in this room several years ago when we were working through the master plan for the community, and when I said, so where would we build this huge wellness center that we're talking about? And I don't remember who it was, but they pointed and said, right there in the courtyard. My heart stopped a little bit, because the courtyard was sacred ground when I was here. You didn't touch the courtyard. Now look at what we have. It's a beautiful building that meets the needs of hundreds of residents every day. Change is going to occur. Our promise to you is that we're going to improve services, we're going to improve programs, and that's going to be our priority at Cedarfield, at Windsor Mead, at Hermitage Richmond, and Hermitage Roanoke. But as the field of senior living changes, we're going to change too. We're looking at opportunities for growth. We have eliminated 3 communities over the past 6 years that were grossly underperforming assets. We sold Hermitage Eastern Shore. We closed the Lydia Roper home, and most recently we sold Hermitage Northern Virginia. Those were not real estate transaction decisions. Those were future service obligation decisions. Everybody knows, and we didn't hide anything, that financially we were not performing well in those 3 campuses. There are days that we still struggle at Hermitage Richmond, and if it weren't for a very, very benevolent trust at Roanoke, there are days that we would struggle at Roanoke as well. But as we look to the future of the city of Richmond, and if you've not driven through Scott's Addition lately, we may want to do that because the city of Richmond is changing. There's an old Comfort Inn that is at 64 in the Boulevard. Is everybody familiar with that building? There are plans for that to be raised, which it needs to be. It's in horrible shape, and it's a bad neighbor, to be honest with you. It's just south of Hermitage Richmond. And there are plans for about 500 parking spaces on 4 acres with 325 apartments. Now, in all honesty, I don't know how they're going to build 500 parking spaces in a parking structure with 325 apartments, but the plans are out there, and it's going to happen. Scott's Addition, there's not a whole lot of land available there anymore, and things are beginning to grow outside of Scott's Addition. Our youngest daughter lives here in town, and she lives at the apartment complex that's at Libby Mill. Great neighborhood, great community. We like it. Dad likes it because it's secure. But it's a different place than what it was just a few years ago. Senior living is changing just like the city of Richmond is changing. And as we look to the future, there aren't going to be many opportunities in the Commonwealth of Virginia for a new Cedar Field or a new Windsor Mead, but we know that there are going to be opportunities for independent living with services. We know that there are going to be opportunities for assisted living and memory support. In all honesty, because of the compression of the labor market and because of compression of Medicare funding, the likelihood of big skilled nursing centers, there's a nursing home in Northern Virginia that's over 300 nursing beds, and they're adding 97 beds in just a few months. It'll be a 400-bed nursing home. To me, that seems like it's going to be a dinosaur, but there are going to be those residents who have Medicaid needs who are filling those beds today. Senior living is evolving. As an organization, we have to evolve too. Kevin mentioned Senior Living Partners of Virginia, which is Affirmation Home Health. Now, I'll be the first one to admit, Affirmation Home Health did not get off to the start we wanted it to. We had a rough start. We've got a new CEO. Her name is Christy Jones. She's doing great work for us. And this calendar year, we served about 125 residents here at Cedar Field through Affirmation Home Health. We see great service and growth opportunities with that, and we're doing that in partnership with LifeSpire. We're talking with other entities about joining that program with us, and we may grow that in time. We know that as a multi-facility provider, our structure is a little different, and I realize that there are frustrations associated with that. We've cut a lot of, if you will, dead wood away, but we still have other challenges before us. Cedar Field is a big place. We've got major challenges. We've got windows that need to be replaced. We've engaged a company out of Atlanta, Georgia called Zumbrunnan to do a capital repair and replacement plan for us. That's all they do. And we're going to get those numbers probably in the next few weeks, but it might be as much as a month. And we need to sit down with the finance committee and talk through the implications of those capital needs. As Kevin said, routine capital for the past 5 years is $17 million. That number is probably going to double over the next 5 years. And we've got to be ready for that. We've got to be prepared for it. This is a big building. This is a big place. And as we look to the future, service to you is key, but we know we're going to grow. We're going to change, just like Cedar Field has changed over the past several years. So Mike, with that, I'm going to pause and open the floor to questions. I know you have one microphone, and Eddie, there's a set. Eleanor has the other. So can we open the floor to questions?
I've got a quick question first.
Yes.
We're opening new assisted living spaces here.
Yes.
And quite frankly, you have to gear up employees for those spaces, whether anybody's in them or not, basically.
Yes.
So when we talk about outside people coming in, the opportunity for Cedar Field is people that are on the cusp need to move over, or what choice does Cedar Field have? Raise the expenses on everybody else, or are they going to bring somebody in to cover those costs? I mean, to me, it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
And one of the best things that's in Cedar Field is assisted living, in my opinion.
So that's that good point, Mike, and I appreciate your comments there. I'm getting a little feedback from something, Eddie. I might be too close to that microphone. But we are bringing those new apartments online. We're developing our marketing plan, which is going to be both an internal and external marketing plan, because we know that we have folks that are waiting for new residences to access assisted living. And as time changes, we're going to be able to deliver more and different services to assisted living. So we're working with the team here at Cedar Field now to develop that criteria. There'll be a staffing plan associated with it, just like there's a staffing plan associated with the Medicare skilled component. So we've added a couple of, Dan, do you remember how many positions we've added for the 20-bed skilled nursing facility?
I don't, and I'm not.
Okay, and I apologize. I don't, and Stephanie, is Stephanie in the room? Oh, Stephanie, how many have we added?
We had 3.
Okay, so we're currently recruiting for 3, Stephanie, or we've filled those 3?
I think we have two left.
Okay, all right, so just like with the...
We couldn't hear
Yep,
her.
I'm going to repeat that.
Talk into the small microphone.
I will do so, thank you. as we move towards certifying the 20 skilled nursing home beds in the healthcare center, we've added 3 new positions with that. Takes time to fill positions today. Stephanie just shared that of those 3 positions we've added, we've filled 1 and we've got 2 more to go. So much like the skilled nursing home, assisted living is going to be an important part of that growth as well. I saw somebody over here. Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, wait for the mic.
Wait for the microphone, please.
Yes. Could you tell us the future plans for the property adjacent to us and the Roper home property?
Yes. So the Lydia, I'll start with the last first. The Lydia Roper home was a purpose-built community that was built in 1921 as a home for the widows of Confederate veterans and the genteel ladies of the South. So it was home to about 21 residents, all females, and it was an antiquated space. So we sold that building. We closed the community. We sold the building to a for-profit real estate developer, and he's converting the 21 apartments that we had into 16 or 17 market rate apartments. We no longer own that property. And the adjacent property we refer to as the Gary property, and then there's a piece that we acquired adjacent to that as well. There's a lot of wetland over there. If you've ever walked back that way, I would encourage you to wear your boots because it's very, very wet. There's a small opportunity for expansion there. We're hanging on to that. We were talking about maybe doing some multifamily housing with parking underneath before the interest rate and the construction market got crazy. Now we're just holding that for future opportunity, but there will be development on that space in the future, and it will in all likelihood be independent life care opportunities here for Cedarfield residents.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Chris Bill Smith.
Yes, sir.
I have 2 things. Number 1, I want to congratulate you for your presentation today. I told you in the last meeting, in my opinion, you need to get more involved, but I think you've cleared up a lot of questions on people's minds and can stop some of the rumors, and I commend you for it. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Chris, the second question, the second suggestion I'd like to make to you is I look around. I've been here a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen this room as full as it is today.
It's been a long time.
And 98% of you probably are independent living. And that's why there's so much interest in this outside selling. You have acknowledged that you understand it's a problem and you're going to work on it.
Yep.
This, I hate to use this word, but this is an older crowd. And everyone in this room is facing a room that there's very few capacity. I would suggest that you consider putting a moratorium on selling outside rooms till we build some necessary concessions. Because we are, I can tell you for a fact, I've been familiar with these facilities. We don't have any rooms that stay available very long. And there's a lot of people in here going to need those rooms. And I think you ought to consider either putting a limit on empty rooms or tone down your outside sales. I think you'd make a lot of people happy here.
So thank you, Mr. Smith, and I appreciate that. We, as I said, that the group meets 3 days a week, and I need to stress, just because one of your neighbors hasn't moved yet doesn't mean that there aren't conversations happening with those neighbors about potential moves in the future. As we all know, that move is a hard move. A friend of mine once said to me the hardest part of the job in senior living is talking to a resident about the last move they're going to make. And for many of our folks, healthcare is that last move. So it takes a lot of time oftentimes to get people to the point where they're ready to make that transition. We have greatly slowed down those moves to health services. We haven't stopped them because one day we'll have 5 vacancies and tomorrow we may have 3. But we're being very deliberate and slow in filling those with outside folks just because of what you said. So I appreciate that, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Mike, there's one here. There's one here in the front.
My question is this. We have had people here as employees who have been irreplaceable, actually, particularly in transportation. And it's not functioning the way they used to go. You were taken to the doctor's office and in a reasonable amount of time picked up. However, on Friday, I had a therapy outside. I waited almost an hour for pickup. Now, I don't think that's right.
Okay.
And also, where is Paul? And where is Bill Stern? They were irreplaceable people as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. So Florence. Okay, I will repeat the question. Yes, sir. Florence, can you address transportation for me? Would you mind? So the question was, something's changed with transportation, and I want to know what it was. So Florence, would you mind joining me up here and addressing that question, and then we'll talk about the staffing changes. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you. Our transportation staff is still not fully equipped. We're currently, this week, we're operating with 3 drivers. We have one out to do to a family matter, and our PRN positions are both open. So we're still struggling just to getting that staffing. We had 5 interviews this week, one of whom was a no-show. We have some good candidates, but it takes a little bit of time for the candidates to go through the process. And sometimes after we make an offer, it doesn't work out. So we are working on that, and we look forward to being fully staffed.
Thank you, Florence.
Other questions?
So if I may, there was also a question, Mike, about turnover. So we have had more turnover than we like. And that's one of the things that Jeff and the department directors are looking at very, very closely. Turnover is never easy. Change of staff is never easy. I realize that, and I hate that part of this job. But at times people do leave. We can't talk about the why from a personnel standpoint. All we can do is focus on improving in the future. So I really can't talk about the specifics as to why the individuals you referenced left, but we are working hard to correct some of our retention challenges as we look to the future. Are there other questions? Ms. Fiske?
Chris, this community is very eager to know about the new executive director.
Yes.
And we understand a committee has been formed, they have met, and you had indicated you would share information with that committee.
Yes.
But look at those of us who sit in this audience. We are truly interested in this process, every single step, and the communication that is taken with this committee be shared with us residents.
Good question. Thank you, Ms. Fiske. The question, if I may, to make sure I understand and to reiterate, is we've formed a group who's helping us identify the characteristics in the new executive director. Will the results or the work of that group be shared with the community? The answer to that is yes. I shared that memo with the community last week as a step 1. After we begin the recruitment process, there'll be continuous updates, and you'll get those from me, from Dan, and from Jeff.
Other questions?
Chris, I just have one about, we just hired a CEO less than a year ago, and now we're starting over with the job description. What happened in the interim?
Good question. We're not starting, we just hired a CEO as a year ago, and we're starting over with a job description. The position description is much, much deeper than just the job description. The job description isn't changing. There's a lot in the document about Richmond, about Cedarfield, about the interaction between Cedarfield and Pinnacle Living, and we need to make sure that that is right. We shared a position description from past recruitment with the group that we met with on January 12th, And one of the things that it talked about was Monument Avenue. Monument Avenue isn't what it was just a few years ago. So those are the types of things that we're updating in that document. We hope to finalize that this week.
My question was answered by the response to the last question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Back of the room, I can't see who that is. I apologize. There are two on this side, Mike. Thank you.
On your satisfaction survey, what was the response rate?
Ooh. On the satisfaction survey, what was the response rate? Dan, that's a number we could share with the group. We're going to have to get that for you. We don't have that information with us today, but we'll make sure Jeff has that and that he can share that with the group.
I would just recommend that when you are selling units, my name's Carlisle Morgan.
Yes.
I would recommend that when you're selling units, you do not have your salespeople make commitments that they cannot keep. In my case, for example, I bought a unit in the new D wing, and I was assured that the second floor flooring and hallway to the elevator would be finished off. And since then, I've talked to 2 executive directors, a total of 4 times, and nothing has been done, even though each case I was assured it would be finished.
Yes, sir.
I think they just shouldn't promise what you're not going to deliver.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that up, and we never strive to do that. The area you're talking about specifically is an item that we're working through pricing with Oregon Construction on. Lacey, timeline for that pricing, do you remember what that is? The second floor from D wing to the elevator?
Yeah, we should have pricing within the week. By next week, we should have within the next 2 weeks for sure.
So that is a priority for us, as well as the lobby and this space, because that was an oversight. It should have been done. Admittedly, it should have been done long ago, sir. Other questions? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my wife said she's not cooking dinner tonight, so I'm here for as long as you'd like for me to be here. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions you may have. Thank you all for being here today. Great crowd. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.